Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Today on CityCast DC, DC is trying out a new pilot program that's designed to give low-income people a break on traffic camera tickets. And as you can imagine, people have some feelings about it. Martin Austermuehle has covered the issue for the 51st, and he's here to talk about the program in particular and the politics of traffic in general. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Martin.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
So tell me, why is DC trying out this pilot program that you wrote about?
So if you've ever driven around DC, you know there's a lot of traffic cameras, and there actually are a lot more traffic cameras now than there were 2 or 3 years ago. Now, of course, traffic cameras are a love or hate proposition. I would say most people probably hate them. And there's always been a lot of complaints about the fact that this is just a way that the city, it's kind of a cash grab for the city. They just use them to get revenue out of drivers. Now, the city has generally set that aside, that argument aside, saying, no, listen, this is a safety issue. Also, you can just not get a ticket by not speeding or not running red lights. But 2 years ago, they put together this equity task force to look at the fact that the fines that these cameras issue are very high, and incomes are all over the place in the district. I mean, this is a very segregated city. There's a lot of people who make a lot of money and lots of folks who make far less money. So they wanted to look at the impact the fines are having on different sorts of people. And out of that task force came this idea of like, why don't we run a pilot program to decrease some of the fines for some people, for low-income folks, to see kind of the impact on, does it increase the chances that they'll actually pay the tickets? Does it change their driving habits? That sort of thing.
Wait, so what does a pilot program mean, and how exactly would this work?
It's just a test. They're going to do it over the course of the spring. They're going to do it for either 120 days or when they get 3,000 people who get tickets, whichever comes first. And
I have a pretty good idea how I'd bet on that one.
Yeah, no, seriously. It's going to be 3,000 and it's going to be fast. And basically, if you're a driver, you get a ticket. You get the ticket sent to you in the mail. If you qualify for being low income, which means you receive food benefits, there should be a notification that tells you can apply for this 50% discount on that ticket. You can apply once. It has to be a ticket that's $100 or below. They'll do that for the period of time that they want to study it. And then they're going to kind of gather all this data, look at, whether they think it's worth pursuing on a full-time basis, and then make that decision down the road.
So if you get 2 tickets in this period, you're out of luck for the second one.
Totally out of luck for the second one. And if you get a ticket for going 26 miles an hour over the speed limit, you're definitely not getting the discount there. This is literally $100 or below, which is essentially, it's something like 3 tickets. It's occupying a bus-only lane. It's, I think, rolling through a stop sign, or it's speeding between 11 and 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. Those are basically the only tickets that are $100 or below.
So if it's a more egregious ticket, or if it's a ticket that an actual cop writes by pulling you over, there's no discount available on those?
No discount at all. And if you're one of the few people that actually gets pulled over by a cop, because that doesn't happen very often now, you have points on your license to worry about. So it's not just the fine, it's also the insurance rates that'll go up.
So how are people responding to this idea? You wrote about it in the 51st. And then I saw you tweeting about it, a lot of emotional responses.
Yeah, I mean, emotion on social media, I never would have thought that would have happened. But yes, it was lots of folks on both sides. I'd say some people are torn. I mean, there's good progressive folks who believe in the value of traffic cameras as a tool to promote safety and also kind of a measure of justice for people who break the rules. But they also recognize that, I mean, it's one thing if you're a person who makes $100,000 a year, $100 ticket, $150 ticket, it's an annoyance, but it's not going to break the bank. If you make $45,000 a year, it's a much bigger difference. So I think the people are split on this idea. I think the big concern for folks who don't love this idea of giving discounts is that they say, well, isn't this just going to give everybody a pass? Isn't this going to basically tell people what you're doing is not that serious? Keep breaking the rules. It's not going to matter. And that's an interesting argument. But again, it ties into this other thing that I touched on in the article, which is there's not a whole lot of research to show that fining people tons of money actually changes behavior. Like if you charge someone $1,000 for speeding, Does it mean they'll never speed again? There's not a ton of research showing that would be the case. So they're kind of playing around with this idea of like, how do we set a fine that is politically acceptable, that encourages people to be safer drivers and doesn't break the bank in the process?
What is their response? If people are saying like, listen, these folks who get these tickets, whatever their income, they're breaking the law. And the law is clear about what the consequences of that is. And why not face those consequences? If you don't want the ticket, don't speed. People who support this, what's their response to that argument?
First off, they say, listen, I mean, if you're making a lot less money, a $50 ticket hits you just the same as a $100 ticket would someone who's breaking the same law but makes more money. So like the impact can be the same on different types of people. Second of all, it's looking at the greater, not necessarily the greater good, but kind of trying to figure out, again, this is a balancing act. I mean, you want people to drive safely. Admittedly, they may have broken law, but the point is like, do they get to a point where they can't even pay the tickets? It's a lost cause. Like, what's even the point? I spoke to a couple of researchers who are very pro measures to keep roads safe. Like they're very pro road diets and more bike lanes and all that jazz. But they said it's worth trying this because the greater message is we want traffic cameras. We want more traffic cameras. We want them to exist because we think they work. But we can't make them seem like a total cash grab because then they're politically unpopular. And that could mean that 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, someone gets elected on a platform of I'm going to get rid of the all the traffic cameras.
Well, right.
And then they're gone.
There's a sense of like, as you say, this is not actually designed to make us drive more safely. This is a cash grab, and it amounts to, there's other people who will argue this is just petty harassment of drivers by a government that doesn't want people driving.
Totally.
But wait, what about people in actual authority positions, council members of the mayor? How have they reacted to this? What did they say to you when you reported?
The main person I spoke to is Charles Allen. He's a Ward 6 council member, chairs the council's transportation committee, which covers all things transportation. He's very pro cycling and pedestrian safety measures. So he's all about consequences for bad drivers. He understands that there's a balance here, that you don't necessarily have to have a very high fine to get people to drive more safely. What he's concerned about is that if this is all the city is doing, then it's not going to be enough. There have to be other measures taken. They have to be more aggressive about finding the bad drivers and making sure that there are more severe consequences for them.
Only 2 residences remain at Ebenezer Row, Capitol Hill's premier new construction condominiums. These spacious 2-bedroom, 2.5 baths are graciously sized to meet your needs and artfully refined to match your style, priced from $1 million. With a walk score of 97, you're just steps from Eastern Market, Barracks Row, and Navy Yard, plus 2 metro stops for seamless city access. Don't miss this rare opportunity to own in one of DC's most coveted neighborhoods. Visit EbenezerRow.com to schedule your private tour today.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
So the other argument, I guess, is, so we have created a system with 2 categories. One, low income, which is defined by if you get food aid, and the other, everyone else. Now, I've read that in, I believe, some of the Scandinavian countries, traffic tickets are specifically tied to a percentage of your income, meaning that like, those of us in the middle will pay less than like if David Rubenstein gets pulled over. Is the idea that this could then grow into something that is more graduated?
So the mayor's task force that kind of kicked off this idea did look at the different models that they could play with, including that one that's used in Europe, which is kind of fines more closely associated with your income in terms of richer people have to pay more fines. And obviously the famous example is in Finland, where a rich guy ended up paying something like 100,000 euro, I think, fine.
Or you could fix the city's budget hole by just pulling over Elon Musk once.
Oh my God, that'd be phenomenal, right? The one thing they conceded was that, and this doesn't say great things about city bureaucracy or how the city operates, they're saying it's just too complicated to connect traffic camera databases to tax databases to actually find out what someone's income is. Having databases speak to each other is apparently enough of a challenge that they said, we don't want to go in the direction of assessing higher fines on richer people right now. It's easier to just try this pilot program where we're kind of letting people opt in who have a very specific, or in a very specific group. It's you get SNAP benefits, food benefits. You are qualified as low income. This is for you.
You reported nicely in your piece about what the $100 fine means to people in this lowest bracket, people who get food aid. Tell us about the difference there. I think there's going to be a lot of people in the middle or people slightly above that level who are going to be, I think, understandably kind of pissed off about this. That, why do they get a break, but I don't? I'm still like way lower than a lot of the people in DC. You wrote about what $100 means.
Right. Yeah, and you make a really good point. I mean, let's just quickly look at the kind of the components of this. So it applies to people who have food benefits. Now, the kind of dividing line for food benefits is about $3,200 a month in income for a family of four. So that's not a lot of money. But that, like you said, if you make $3,300 a month in income, you may not qualify, but you are by no means far richer than the person making $100 less a month. So there's that issue. That is true. But the $100 a month is an interesting one. I mean, like I said, both my wife and I have like kind of traditional-ish, she's a teacher, I'm a freelance reporter type person. So good, solid professional jobs. $100 kind of sucks, but it's not the hugest deal in the world as long as it's not consistent. But someone who's making a minimum wage in the district, that's $17 an hour. I mean, $100 is literally 6 hours of work, roughly. The impact is obviously different there. I think it's worth conceding that point. And it's understood that the disparities in income in the district are huge. I mean, there's not much middle. And there's lots of people on the high end of the income scale, and there's a lot of people on the low end. And so you have to design a system that kind of works for both.
By that logic, right, if this is supposed to help low-income people not be completely crushed and not be so alienated from the system that they don't even pay tickets that are rightfully assessed, why only apply this pilot to the easiest fine to pay?
I think because they were struggling with, you don't want to send a message that everything is the same. If you speed 11 to 15 over the speed limit, that's the first type of ticket you'll get with a speed camera, because big secret, which isn't a secret at all, that between 1 and 10 over, they won't send you a ticket. They just don't. 11 to 15 is their first ticket you get as a speeder. So there's a recognition that, that's not great. If you're driving 36 miles an hour in a 25, it can be dangerous. But it's certainly not comparable to someone who's driving 20 miles over the speed limit, 25 miles over the speed limit. So they wanted to make a bit of a distinction. I also think the reality is that this is going to cost money, and they have to be sensitive to the revenue implications. I mean, that's the other big 800-pound elephant in the room, is that even though the city says the traffic cameras are not for revenue, they do bring in a ton of revenue. So anything the city does to change the cameras, to change the fine structure, they have to account for the fact that they're going to be losing money.
So I wonder what behavioral economists would make of this. There's that famous story about the daycare that was tired of parents coming to pick up their kids late after closing time, and so began assessing fines for that. And once they did, the rates of parents coming late actually increased because they started thinking of it as fee for service rather than being late as actually an inconsiderate thing to do. In this case, I mean, are we effectively saying to a lot of people, low income or not, that low level speeding is just like part of the cost of doing business, and if you want to pay the extra money, you can speed too?
I mean, potentially, but this is where the other cities that have speed cameras come into the equation. Right. Everybody kept pointing me to New York City. New York City has lots of cameras for both red light running and speeding, but their tickets top out at like $50. And the NYC, the New York City's Department of Transportation, I think it was just earlier this year, they put out a report kind of assessing where their cameras were, if they were working and promoting safer driving. They claim that they promote safer driving, but they also they had a whole bunch of paragraphs about equity, about the issue that these are $50 tickets, which it sends enough of a message without being so severely and disproportionately impacting certain people. So they literally wanted to call it the fact that we think 50 is a good number for us. DC doesn't have a $50 ticket for anything. I mean, 100 is where you start. And I looked at other places. Montgomery County starts at $40. Virginia basically doesn't have speed cameras, so it doesn't really work. But San Francisco doesn't have anything comparable to DC. I mean, DC is on the upper end of fines for traffic cameras.
And is there a theory that if the fines are lower, I mean, whether they're lower just for the very poor or for everybody, that increases participation and that's a social good in its own way?
Yeah, they said that, I talked to a couple of people who said that research in California had shown that if you either lower fines or offer certain groups discounts, payment rates increase. Like they're more likely to repay, which makes some basic sense, right? But the other thing that a lot of people kept bringing up is that it shouldn't just be about lowering fines necessarily. People have to know that there's a certain consequence. The chance that they're going to get caught is very high. And I think we're there now in DC because there's 500 cameras around. But you have to get a ticket extremely quickly. You have to be notified right away. And it's that'll make you change your habits more than paying like $300 for, running a red light or something like that.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
Take me out to the ball game. What are you doing? Did you know DirecTV has the most MLB games? So, you're singing. Yeah, they put your favorite teams front and center right when you turn it on. Buy me some cold cuts and flapjacks. Those aren't even the words. I'm allergic to peanuts.
Stream DirecTV, home of the most MLB games. Visit DirecTV.com. Claim based on total games offered on national and regional sports networks. RSNs available with choice package or higher. Availability of RSNs varies by zip code and package.
There's other critics, sort of from the other, typically from the other side of the political spectrum, which you mentioned, who say this just detracts from the real traffic issue, which is making the roads actually safer. And we know there are a bunch of people around here, many of them with suburban tags, who rack up enormous numbers of fines and maybe don't pay them, or even if they do, they're able to continue to get their license year after year. They're able to stay on the road despite manifest record of not following the rules. While we got you here, what are some of the other steps the city's taking to improve traffic safety, if they are?
Right. So just recently, it was kind of big news. The district's attorney general, Brian Schwab, filed 3 civil lawsuits against 3 Maryland drivers who combined had something like 260 tickets over the course of a decade, worth something like $90,000 in unpaid fines. So he sued each one individually in the district for that money, basically saying, you've got all these tickets, you got to pay up. Now, that's a power that he didn't have before that he recently gained because the DC Council passed a new law giving him that power. So that's one thing that they think could change the game, because now Maryland and Virginia drivers will no longer be able to just rack up tickets and fines and never pay them, because there is, in theory, the fear that the attorney general could come after them. Now, again, the civil lawsuit process is very slow, so who knows if it'll have an impact. But that same bill also had other provisions that haven't been implemented yet, including assessing points on people's licenses for getting traffic camera tickets. Like right now, you just pay your fine and life goes on. But you get pulled over by a cop for the same offense, you get points on your license, which everybody knows it drives up insurance rates, and you get enough points, you have to go take remedial driving lessons. Now, that part of the bill did not get funded yet, so that's not yet happening. So there are things moving on the legal side. There are, of course, people who say, well, the other thing we have to do is just, it has to be actual concrete. Like we have to build safer roads. So stop building roads that look like freeways, and then people will stop driving on them like they're freeways.
So in the recent past, when there has been talk of doing things to throw the book at ticket scofflaws, maybe making it harder for people to renew their licenses, that sort of thing, people have raised equity concerns about that too, which, again, pissed off a lot of people for some of the same reasons we're discussing here. Have people raised that kind of concerns about some of these new things that you are laying out?
Yeah, I mean, equity it kind of cuts both ways, because like you said, a couple of years ago, the council actually changed the law so that you can still renew your driver's license now in the district, even if you have a ton of unpaid tickets on your record. Before, you couldn't. It was $100 of unpaid tickets and you couldn't renew your license. And they said that unfairly targets people who don't have enough money to pay tickets. So let's get rid of it. A lot of people complained about that because they said that is a tool you are removing from the city's toolbox to come after bad drivers.
Well, and also they said you are making it so that I have to share the road with someone who has a manifest record of violating the rules of the road and not caring about it.
Absolutely. And the other equity side of this that I hear a lot of people talking about, which is true, is that you look at the actual roadway deaths in the district and who's getting killed and where they're getting killed. And a lot of them, like unfortunately, a lot of things in the city, it's very designated parts of the city. I mean, we're talking wards 5, 7, and 8.
Are those neighborhoods do they have less cameras?
No, some of them actually have more cameras, but they have worse roads. And this is, again, ties into how roads were built, when they were built, and, the fact that a lot of them are still built to be essentially freeways from the middle of town out to the suburbs. So people are saying, well, listen, how are you dropping fines for certain drivers when the folks who are being killed by bad drivers are in low income and predominantly Black neighborhoods? Like, the whole equity thing seems to run headfirst into each other when you consider those facts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of the story of crime politics in the last few years too, that equity cuts both ways.
Totally.
So wait, what is the next step in this pilot? Are they going to sort of announce to the world whether this thing goes?
They'll announce to the world that the thing is starting. Right now, they're kind of finalizing the rules that'll govern it. Then they'll kick it off. It'll run its 120 days or 3,000 drivers, whichever comes first. It'll be the 3,000 drivers, I guarantee. And after that, it goes back to this this in-house think tank that the district has called the Lab. They run all these experiments to try to make governance better, make the city run better. So they'll look at the data and see, did more people pay their tickets? Was it a good experience for drivers? Did they learn their lessons? Like, do we think this is something we should do on a more permanent basis? Now, to do it more permanently, that would probably most likely require going to the council and saying we have to pay for this, because it means less income, less revenue coming into the city. Now, again, revenue is a sensitive thing nowadays because of the state of the city's economy, what with Trump slashing the federal government.
In the city's budgeting, how do they estimate ticket revenue? I mean, they're not supposed to be using it or thinking of it as a way of paying their, ongoing operating expenses. But they do bring in a certain amount. And I assume, when they're trying to project a couple of years out, they have some sort of back of the envelope assumption about how much they're going to bring in. How do they do that? And how is that tied to like what it is that you're supposed to do and not do with this kind of money?
Right. So the assumption is roughly $250 million a year in revenue from the traffic tickets. Now, of course, that's what they assume is going to happen based on the historical number of tickets handed out and how many cameras they have. Obviously, if fewer people are paying them, they're not going to get that revenue. But this, you touched on like the one kind of third rail of this debate is, where does the money go? A couple of years ago, the members of the council wanted to redirect this so that, and I think they briefly did, so that any money from traffic cameras, any revenue from the fines would go to pay for improvements to roads. And that's it. So basically, improvements to road safety. So basically, we're using the money from these traffic cameras to pay for, road diets, additional bike lanes, kind of better pedestrian access, that sort of stuff. But because of budget concerns a couple of years ago, the mayor redirected all the money back to the general fund, which is the budget. So essentially, every time you pay that $100 ticket, it's going straight to the city's main source of funding. And so if they ever want to cut back on that, you're not just cutting the bike lane on the street next, a block over. You're now potentially cutting programs like in schools or in recreation or, infrastructure, that sort of stuff.
Now, I hate to even ask this, but this is the world we live in. Republicans in Congress last year tried to do away with traffic cameras in D.C. Is something like this, which has all kinds of culture war implications because of its focus on equity, is this like waving a red flag at them to meddle in the traffic camera program writ large?
Oh, I'm sure it is. I mean, because like you said, it's got equity. If it has equity or diversity or inclusion anywhere in the language governing how this thing is supposed to work, it's going to provoke those sorts of concerns up on Capitol Hill amongst Republicans. And yeah, they already hate the traffic cameras, so this will just make them hate them more. Now, again, when they first proposed getting rid of them, that didn't go anywhere because cooler heads prevailed, because I think they also realized if from one year to the next you ban the city from using these cameras, well, then someone has to account for the $250+ million that the city will no longer have in revenue. Now, of course, the members of Congress could say that's not our problem, that's the district's problem, which is true. But again, that may be the thing that saves the district, that given the circumstances, maybe that's the one thing they'll do is go easy on the revenue, but who knows?
Martin, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you learned something or we helped you think about traffic fines in a new way, share this episode with the lousiest driver you know. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.